There are those moments in one's broadcasting career that one cannot hold their excitement at all. And I can't hold my excitement because you actually bring a friend on. And I don't say this in a prideful way or boastful way. I don't mean it. But when I bring on my friends from across the pond in America, a lot of the time I've actually physically met them and I know them. And I am beyond excited. I'm very grateful that a friend of mine who will be known to you, Kevin Shipp, is now going to join me.
Mark, Kevin, my friend, it's good to see you. It's wonderful to be on with you.
It's fantastic to see you. It's been fantastic to see you so well, and I am delighted that you have you've been able to join me today, and thank you so much. Thank you. So I want to get to it, right? I want to get to it because this is important. So I just want to. Here's your first book from the Company of Shadows, and you have a new book that is coming out at any time. I don't think it's released yet. You can tell me, and throughout the show, the logo of the new book. But I'm really the title means is huge, and we go on to discuss this. Twilight of the Shadow Government, when transparency will kill the deep state. You and I have had a number of conversations since April 2020, and I was delighted to meet you then. We even had some laughter around a dinner table. And until this point, there are those dear friends like Audrey and Brian who were there with us, who we've all never forgotten that because of the humor, but also because of some of the things that were said. And we don't joke about these things, but sometimes humor has to come in. And over the last few years, we have discussed the deep state. You have been going on about the deep state. Suddenly the phrase the deep state became this popular thing to say. Kevin, could you define the deep state for us and then go into why the transparency of this is so important?
Absolutely, my friend. I like to say I was talking about the deep state when talking about the deep state wasn't cool. Back when I started taking the risk, decided it didn't matter to me if I was prosecuted, coming forward and giving the truth to people about the deep state. And what I make in my presentations and speeches, and I think we got a couple million views on those, is based on what I've seen. I call the shadow government, specifically the CIA, the secret part of the government that runs our elected officials, the judiciary, and even the president. I see that as different from the deep state, which is the huge monolithic juggernaut of military industrial contractors, secret intelligence contractors, lobbyists, and others that run the administrative state in our government. The shadow government is the national security state, of which I have alarming concern about, as I think most Americans do and people around the world. I wrote Twilight of the Shadow Government as a full expose of the shadow government, specifically the CIA, and how it controls Congress, it controls the president, it controls the judiciary, all three branches of our government, including and especially the elected branches. And it has penetrated our news media, it has penetrated social media. Operation Mockingbird, which is way back in the 70s. I call it Mockingbird 2.0 because not only is it still there, it's gotten even worse and gone into social media and is prevalent in Silicon Valley. We are at a very dangerous hour here in America, in the United States. And I in my opinion, we're under a post-constitutional government, and that the CIA has become such a monster through its unconstitutional and illegal power of secrecy that it is literally pulling the strings in our government, in our news media, and social media. I wrote this book because that has got to stop. And in this book, I make several strong recommendations on exactly how to reform the CIA and remove its illegal authority of secrecy, which it was never really given, and remove its illegal covert operational authority also, and then retain the rest of the agency that Truman intended, the director of intelligence and the analysts and all the good parts of the CIA. Keep those, but get rid of this illegal, horrible juggernaut. In the book, I go into detail regarding the CIA's drug running activities, connections to the mafia, some peculiar connections to 9/11. And it is, I'll tell you, my friend, an explosive book. And the kind of humorous part, if you want to put it that way, I had to submit the manuscript to the CIA for pre-publication review, which I did 2 weeks ago. You know, that's like submitting a crime report to the criminal before you file. So I'm sure we're going to see some fireworks because I'm calling for their dismantling and reform. But I can tell you this, that information is going to come out. And I feel directly, and this is just, I can say something between you and I personally. I prayed about this for a long, long time, consulted some people about it, and became totally convinced that this is what the Lord wants me to do. I don't know, you want to call it in a prophetic sort of way or whatever, I'll let the Lord be the judge of that. But to be the person that stands up against this horrific, evil, murderous organization, expose it for what it is, and bring down its illegal operations and its power of secrecy over the American people.
Because there is no doubt about it that its power of secrecy, the evil that it does, the consequences of that might have been in 1954, but that's playing out now, isn't it? If you then go and do a coup in Iran, okay, certain things happen. Shah comes in, but if you then go down into South America and start playing around down there, all those consequences of what's happening here.
Yes,
Kevin,
and that would include Ukraine also.
Right, absolutely. Kevin, when Truman set up, I think, the CIA in 1947, was there a comment that soon after that he was concerned that he had actually created the American version of the Gestapo? Did he go into regret?
He absolutely did. In the National Security Act of 1947, it did not give the CIA covert operational authority. It mentions in passing that it would do from time to time what the National Security Council directs. It did not give the CIA exclusive power over covert operations. The CIA took that and within 2 years had gone rogue. Within 4 years, Truman finally wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post, and we have this as the intro to our book, claiming that, stating unequivocally that he regretted the formation of the CIA, that it had gone rogue, that it was no longer doing what it was created to do. And he actually said it's casting a shadow, quote unquote, over our constitutional freedoms. And he thought something needed to be done about it. So he regretted it to his dying day because it became something that he never intended. My call is to return the CIA back to what Truman intended. And that's an intelligence gathering, analyzing organization like the Directorate of Intelligence, providing good, solid policy intelligence to the president and policymakers. That's what it was intended to be. It has become a rogue monster, probably responsible for the death of somewhere of 7 million people, coups of democratic governments, and horrible things that agency has done in secret and never been held accountable. The Church Committee scratched the surface of it with MK Ultra, and I have some things about MK Ultra in the book. They scratched the surface of what is basically a horribly evil organization on the operational side.
Right, and what is incredible, isn't it? Because you've written about this. We've thrown that word around, conspiracy, you're a conspiracy theorist, where actually we've reached that point where every single conspiracy have run out. We've run out of them. We need some new ones. In fact, we're not actually going to get any new ones because this is the truth. And that I showed you before our show that I've got a number of books here, and the information is so important. And we need to be covering you in prayer, my brother, because
please.
we think of, we have to go there. We have to go back to JFK. We have to go there.
And we do in the book. Yeah.
Right. What direction do you take it in regard to the book without giving the plot away? But you can't. But what direction do you take it in that regard?
Yes, and let me mention that we have multiple footnotes and evidentiary documents in this book that document and source everything we put in there. It is all evidence. If the CIA tries to redact or black out any of that, there'll be a violating the Executive Order 12356, Section 1.6A, which says that the CIA cannot redact information just because it's embarrassing or reveals criminal activity. There is, and we get into this in some detail in the book, that when you look at all the facts and put all the pieces together, I think it's without question that the CIA had a role with the mafia in the assassination of John F. Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy also.
Right. Absolutely. And of course, there's been this whole thing of the historical denial, haven't there, of Herbert Walker Bush, no, I
That's
wasn't
what they
on the
do.
cross, Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've submitted your manuscript of the revelation of what the criminals have been doing to the criminals themselves.
Yes.
With no hyperbole, or I'm not joking, how does this play out? What does this then mean? What would they give a press release and say we don't agree with this? How would they respond?
Well, this is where prayer comes in, because, and I took this calculated risk. They're going to have to come after me. Everything in that book is documented, firsthand accounts from myself, documented sources regarding the Kennedy assassinations. So their recourse is, first of all, with their typical MO, they'll try to discredit me. You can't call me a conspiracy theorist, because every single chapter in that book is footnoted and documented with credible sources. So they can't go there with that, although they will try. They will try through their social media contacts and their news media contacts, like the New York Times and the Washington Post, the Mockingbird papers. They'll try to discredit me, and we'll see. It'll be funny what they come up with, but they will try that. Then they will try threats on me personally of prison for violating the secrecy agreement. That's not going to work, because there's nothing classified in there. And I am full ready to take them to public court for violating that executive order and take this thing all the way. I think that, and I don't say this lightly, but this has to be the case with me, which is why I'm pursuing this 100%. I feel called to do this. Someone has got to take the lead and expose this agency down through history. And I say this humbly, because I'm nothing special. God chooses people who are available, down through history, people have stood up, taking the risk. And then once they do, other people follow. And one of the things I want to change is, I had a very well-known author, a friend of mine, that I interviewed the other day, who told me he was terrified of what the shadow government was going to do to him, because he was talking about Edward Snowden and talking about Julian Assange, and was literally threatened by 2 government agents and told to stop doing it. Then we have Tucker Carlson, who is doing the same thing on his show, and Mike Pompeo, the so-called Christian director of the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, called Tucker Carlson and threatened him with arrest if he kept talking about Snowden and these other revelations on his program, that he would be arrested for doing so. Now, we all know Tucker, and we love Tucker. Tucker essentially told him to pound sand, and did the right thing, which is always the right thing. Come out publicly and reveal what they did. And I told this other author, I said, you should have filmed them, and you should have put it on the internet, because transparency, and which is what this book is all about, is what's going to kill them. It is secrecy that gives them their power. And it is secrecy that makes your average American terrified of them. What is wrong with that picture in a constitutional government when your average person on the street is terrified of the CIA? That's got to go. It's unconstitutional. It's illegal. And it is my goal and mission to stop that.
Well, and frankly, it's historically documented, as we just referred to Truman. There he is, as President of the United States, concerned, and just said, what have I actually created? And of course, 2 years before the United Nations comes into being, there is another whole discussion there. What I'm saying, what you're saying, is that when Dulles turns around, in regard to the sad death of JFK at that time, and then they turn around and invent the word conspiracy theorist to then hide and cover up their crime.
I have that document. Yeah.
Right. So vindication is not about us going, look at us. We're not saying that. But vindication, we let God vindicate us. Right. And that is happening by the truth then being revealed. I just want to touch in something in your first book, because I didn't know this, but it will segue into what your comments are on 9/11. on
Yes.
on 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
So on page 118 of From the Company of Shadows, this book means a lot to me because it's personally signed by that man I'm talking to now.
Thank you.
And I'll just remind you, something of what you wrote. To Mark, for the love of freedom. And thank you. And so page 118, thus the Patriot Act gutted important provisions in the US Bill of Rights. It also violated the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution by authorizing secret searches and seizures. In the words of Senator Russell Feingold, we will lose the war on terrorism without firing a shot if we sacrifice the liberties of the American people. Now, a few days ago, I saw a wonderful clip of Tulsi Gabbard talking about, she turned around and she said, I don't know if you know, but once a year in Congress, they read the Constitution of the United States. And when I found out about this, I wanted to sign up. I signed up for it. I think she went and did that. And there she was then as a Democrat. And she turned around and said that fellow Democrats, I think, words to the effect of saying, well, that's a right wing thing to do.
That's how far we have sunk in this country. We are at a dangerous phase. President Biden and his administration, I think it's pretty obvious, is the darkest, most immoral, tyrannical president this country has ever had. And he has brought all kinds of twisted, perverted policies, including Biden is pushing for transgender surgeries for children as young as 8 years old, abortion up to just before birth, heinous things that we never would have conceived of 10 years ago. So the move against Joe Biden, and I'm asking everybody to band together, the MAGA people, the JFK, RFK Jr. Supporters, rather, the liberals, the libertarians, band together, everybody, and get this man out of the White House. That is my number one goal, is to get Biden out of there, because if he was to get a second term, it's all over. I mean, it's almost all over now. It's that dangerous in the United States. People are terrified of what this government has become. What they are using the intelligence services and the FBI to do is just abominable. And so we have to stand up now. We all have to join together in unity, despite any differences we may have. And we have got to vote that man out of office.
How do you do that? How do we join? How do you join all these different parts? I'm asking the same question over here. How do you do that, Kevin? What's your plan?
In the last chapter of the book, when I put out some specific ways to reform and reorganize the CIA, I call for what I refer to as the Avalanche. And the Avalanche is for people in every walk of life: Democrat, Republican, MAGA, RFK Jr. supporters, libertarians, everyone. Form an avalanche, and I'm calling for 100 million people to stand up and demand that the CIA is held accountable, that it is reformed, that its power of secrecy is removed, and demand that the branches of our government that have been oppressing people, some of these innocent January 6th protesters, like the grandma they just arrested, demand that they let those people go. Now, there were a few felons thrown in there that had outstanding warrants. But then you had people like these grandmas, and I know a couple of people personally who went there just to protest. And they're arresting innocent people without a trial, and they're putting them in prison. That's got to stop. And under the new administration, which I hope and pray will be a Republican one, I hope that will stop. And they will appoint a special counsel to look into those arrests, who did them, why they did them, how they did them. And then hopefully we must see some indictments coming.
Well, this is a perfect time to say, please, everybody, go on AmericanGulagChronicles.com and buy the book Art of Confinement. There's 2 books there that support the J6 prisoners. And of course, my dear friend and someone that you know as well, David Summerall of StopHate.com. And, fully behind that. And you're absolutely right of how that whole of that abuse. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Nancy Pelosi was over a few weeks ago, and she was in a debate in the Oxford Union, and I've forgotten Winston's full name, but he used to be a Mumford and Sons, and then he basically had to leave because he made a tweet about questioning the political correct agenda. And Nancy Pelosi in the debate was even saying no, it was an insurrection, a violent insurrection led by this president, which is, as we know, is an outrage. But that whole incident, and I can't even believe, I mean, David and I recently just did an interview, we're discussing that. I can't believe, if we look at the fact that we're in 2024, that event took place in January 2021, and it illustrates this whole thing of the propaganda arm, Kevin. It took so long. It took so long to get, because I want to go to another book in a second, but it took so long to, of course, dear Ashley Babbitt, immediately people knew about her death. But people did not know about Kevin Greason, Benjamin Phillips, Roseanne Boyland. And straight away, they then, of course, with Officer Signick and this whole thing of saying, he was beaten to death with a fire extinguisher, he was not. And the fact that newspapers took so long to put a small paragraph at the back of their paper to say this didn't happen. So, Kevin, you referred to the CIA infiltration into social media, and we'll come to that in a second. What about Amazon and Jeff Bezos there? What's this $600 million contract he has? Could you explain that one?
And a lot of people apparently don't seem to know about that. But yes, Jeff Bezos, who of course now is owner of the Washington Post, the oldest and most solid CIA Mockingbird paper from its inception, is now under George Bezos, and he's just appointed a new CEO, I think, as the paper is doing so poorly because it has a problem publishing the truth. Jeff Bezos, this should send chills down everybody's spine, has entered into a $600 million contract with the CIA for, quote unquote, monitoring the cloud and future things dealing with the cloud, unquote. That's our data. And whenever the CIA, and we'll get into In-Q-Tel, the CIA's investment arm here in a moment, but whenever the CIA enters into a contract, especially of that size, they never do it one way. They always demand something in return, and that usually is signing a CIA secrecy agreement, which binds everybody involved, including a secretary, to never talk about that operation, even if they see something grossly illegal or immoral. They can never talk about that contract publicly for the rest of their life. That's the power of the CIA secrecy agreement. It doesn't use it as it's supposed to protect legitimate national security, which we're all for. It uses it as a weapon to bind people from revealing some of the things that it has done that are patently illegal.
So how does that work out? What is Amazon going to be doing? Sorry if this sounds a very naive question. What is Amazon? I mean, to me, Amazon is an operation where I go and order goods, and then those goods miraculously arrive through my front door in a very, very short space of time. And when you are in communities of ruralness, sometimes that is such a blessing and all the rest. So what are they going to be doing for the CIA? What does this contract, what does it mean? What does it mean?
Well, I wish they would have just stuck to delivering packages, because they're really good at that. I think everybody likes that kind of service, and it was a brilliant concept. Amazon has started AWS, Amazon Web Services, where they branched out into the cloud, and now they're doing things in the cloud, and that's where the CIA contract is, which is secret, is classified. And so the only people that are going to know what's going on there, of course, is the CIA, and everybody else that they've papered with a secrecy agreement could be Jeff Bezos himself, unless he insulated himself and had his lower managers sign the paper, so to speak. So we don't know. We don't know what the CIA is doing with Amazon. That's intentional on the CIA's part. That's the problem. That's why we're going to kill the shadow government with transparency, because as long as they can do these things in secret, like AWS and the cloud, and people can't see what they're doing, they're going to get away with it, and they're going to continue to expand their power.
And I say this very reverently, because when JFK said, I want to smash it into 1,000 pieces. We look at how big it is. We are talking about billions of pieces now
Yeah.
in regard to their
Multiple
overreach.
billions.
Multiple.
In
How
a secret budget. Yep.
right? How come we've reached a point until now, do you think, where history has been so rewritten, hasn't it? I mean, it's taken, and I'll show this book. It's taken books, of course, like this
Yeah.
to then,
Excellent book. Highly recommend it.
right,
Beautifully done.
which is David Talbot, The Devil's
Yes.
Chessboard, Alan Dulles, The CIA, and the Rise of America's Secret Government.
Yes.
How come it's taken so long for all, when we look at people like Jim Mars is a writer exposing the various things. How come it's taken so long for us to meet to be at this point where the truth is out there?
Because of secrecy, because of the power and the threats of secrecy. And some people think, well, the CIA used to be bad, but it's reformed its ways. The CIA started out bad when it was OSS, and then when it was created, the Central Intelligence Agency in 1947, it went completely rogue and completely off the charts from its inception, and it's never stopped. It hasn't changed. It's continued. Just look at Ukraine. The CIA director was making multiple trips into the Ukraine, a democratically elected government, and working towards the coup of Ukrainian government. They're still doing it. They have not changed. Their methods have not changed, to the point of sometimes it's stupid because they think they're going to work again when they failed the first time. But they're the same. They have not changed, and they will not change until they're reformed.
Are you referring to the coup of 2014?
2014, yes.
Right. And where this whole thing of, and I'd be interested in your opinion, where it was reported, snipers are on a roof and they seem to be firing at both sides and all this kind of thing, which then stirs up this awful agitation that then happened, and people died.
Yes. And Putin he's a murderer, obviously. Some people say he's a Christian. I've watched several interviews where he just talks about the power of the Russian church. He never mentions the name of Jesus. So I think he's a CINO, Christian in name only. I don't believe that for 1 second. And he's caused a bloodthirsty war and bloodbath in Ukraine, killing thousands and thousands of his young men. So I'm not propping up Putin by any stretch. However, NATO, and specifically the U.S. government, knew, going back to a previous agreement several years ago, where the U.S. promised Russia that we will not put a Ukrainian NATO ally on your border, as you have requested. They don't want nuclear weapons and those sorts of things on their border, like we didn't want them in Cuba. So violating that agreement completely, the United States starts sending people into Ukraine. John Brennan, the CIA director, Victoria Nuland, who's the queen of the shadow government, Department of State, working with George Soros NGO organizations and actually paying them with US dollars to help foster, stage, and conduct this coup in Ukraine against a democratically elected government. That's what happened there. And of course, you have to dig to find those facts out. We covered that in the book, and everything is documented. But that just goes to show you, in my opinion, based on the research I've done, that the whole Ukraine situation was provoked by the United States government and threats of Ukraine joining NATO and putting NATO forces on Russia's border, violating the agreement that the United States made with Russia not to do that years ago, trashing that agreement and then doing it anyway, provoking Russia to try to defend itself. It's a simple fact. It blows your mind how stupid, probably how diabolical our government is at those levels in the Department of State and the National Security State.
What was your reaction when Rubio said to Victoria Nuland, does Ukraine have nuclear weapons? And then there's a slight pause. And then she says, no, but it has biolabs. What's your reaction to that?
Ukraine has biolabs, and there's CIA biolabs. Yes, inside Ukraine. Now, why in the world would the CIA have biolabs inside Ukraine? That is a fact. There's another thing Russia picked up on that. What do you mean? The CIA sponsored biolabs in Ukraine near our border? What in the world? You can see how Russia would freak out over these things. And yes, There are biolabs in there. They were sponsored by the CIA. What are they doing? Well, what biolabs do is they store deadly toxins and do experiments on them, like in Wuhan, where Dr. Anthony Fauci funded that debacle. So, yeah, they were in Ukraine. They're in other places also.
And of course, Fauci, bringing us up to date as well. Fauci was in Congress, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, whatever we think of her, was absolutely taking it to him and was going on about the experiment on the beagles and all the rest. And the reason I'm raising that, I'm not saying this. We're not saying this to go, look at us, we're now right. It's the last thing we want. But right. I tell you what, we have taken a heck of a lot of flack for actually standing up to things and saying this is real. And that's partly, I think, because people's paradigm is so being threatened.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that gets back to the fear factor. The CIA rules out of secrecy and out of fear. People fear it, and that's how it does it. I'm calling for this avalanche, and I want 100 million people standing up against the CIA. You can't go after one person when there's 100 million coming after you. And people need to stop fearing the CIA. I have people all the time tell me, I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing. I back you 100%, but I don't want to come out and make that public because I don't want them going after me. And I tell them, they're not going to go after you. Yeah, they'll go after me because I'm blowing the lid off this whole thing. But you're an average Joe citizen. They don't have the resources to do that. They're going to target the people they consider the most risk to their empire. But I'm tired of hearing people say that they're terrified of the CIA. That is how the CIA has stayed in control. And remember that Thomas Jefferson quote? I think I used it when we met, when I spoke. When a people fears their government, there's tyranny. When the government fears the people, there's liberty. That answers it all right there. We have got to stop fearing them. We've got to stand up against them. We've got to demand reform, and we've got to make it happen.
I hear you very loudly on that, and I want to take you, because I think this is really, really important, because this is where it ties both our countries up. So, Spygate by Dan Bongino.
Mm-hmm.
So, the sources have insisted, this is on page 88 of his book, the sources have insisted the British weren't spying on Trump or his team directly, but the alleged conversations were picked up by chance as part of a routine surveillance of Russian intelligence assets. This news led Trump and his team to accuse British intelligence of spying on their campaign for the Obama administration, as the American Spectator put it. Brennan wanted to keep his position in the Clinton administration, so he teamed up with British spies and Estonian spies to cripple Trump's candidacy. Now, quickly moving on, this is about Brennan. A supporter of the American Communist Party at the height of the Cold War, Brennan brought into the CIA a raft of subversives and gave them plum positions from which to gather and leak political espionage on Trump. He bastardized standards so that these left-wing activists could burrow in and take career positions under the patina of that phony professionalism. They could then present their politicized judgments as non-partisan. Here we go. GCHQ, which is the center of our spy stuff over here, and the CIA have denied collusion. But as reported by The Guardian, both US and UK intelligence sources acknowledged that GCHQ played an early prominent role in kickstarting the FBI's Trump-Russia investigation, which began in late July 2016. I'm just going to end it with this before I hand over to you. And I need to find the letter. And when I find the letter, I'm going to send you a copy with much joy. Right. In 2018, I wrote to my local member of parliament then, and I said, will Theresa May be apologizing to Donald Trump on behalf of GCHQ for spying on the Trump campaign? And I got a letter back by the then member of parliament, Alan Duncan, who was in the Foreign Office, saying Andrew Napolitano's accusations are, a load of rubbish. But I refer to Boris Johnson's speech in the House of Commons saying, no, we're not spying, bloody blah. Yes, they were. Yeah, yes, they were, isn't it? Could you explain the Five Eyes, Kevin? Could you explain
Sure.
what happened?
Well, this is how they do it. And the CIA is all about dastardly deeds, but making sure that they'll only do an operation if there's plausible denial that they didn't do it. That's how they pick operations. Well, can we plausibly deny this? Deny this? Yeah, we can. All right, then let's do it. Well, okay. So you got GCHQ that is spying on certain Russian contacts, Russian businesses, the contacts of those Russian businesses, the people that have proposed contracts with those Russian businesses, and all of a sudden, perhaps the Trump organization falls into one of those businesses that has been talking about building something in Ukraine, and the GCHQ starts monitoring them now, and then the GCHQ faithfully, because they and the CIA are like Siamese twins, faithfully shares that information with the CIA, and the CIA can claim plausible deniability that they didn't spy on Trump. That's how they use the Five Eyes around the world as a third party spying. I'm not saying all the Five Eyes are bad. You have an Australian and the rest of them, and there's some very good people in those organizations, and I know GCHQ very well. But in this case, the CIA used them, in my view, for plausible denial to conduct this surveillance.
And I think, didn't I've forgotten his name, but the then boss of GCHQ soon resigned once Trump had.
Yes, that's correct. Immediately, with no explanation, he immediately resigned. Now, what that doesn't show a honesty that per se, does it? Probably to spend more time with his family. The old quote, when you're caught.
So you're right. Well, in many ways, you're right. I suppose we can only guess, but the whole thing is that maybe he was actually doing what we're accusing him of doing, and felt rather uncomfortable about that. But it just shows you all those particular links. So when you're in your new book, in regard to 9/11, where do you take that direction? Where do you take it in a new direction?
Well, there's a bombshell in there. I'm not going to discuss until the book is out. There's a bombshell that I document in there. As a former criminal investigator and a former internal CIA espionage investigator, I looked at 9/11 as an investigator would, and found out that the 9/11 Commission report was full of holes, and in some places it was ridiculous. So I have something in the book, I think, that's going to raise a lot of eyebrows regarding what role our government played in that. That's all I'm going to say there. But really, and they still, the Mockingbird media, New York Times, Washington Post, at the top of that list, still shoot this down. All you got to say is Tower 7. That was a controlled demolition. I've talked to structural engineers. There is no question in their mind that was a controlled demolition. And even to your average person that looks at that thing collapse and free fall from the center down knows that's a controlled demolition. And yet the 9/11 Commission said it was there was a fire, I think, like on the 8th floor or something, that brought that whole building down, that fell into its footprint in a matter of seconds. That's just one thing, but there's more. And in the book, there's a startling revelation in there about that. And I'll just leave that at that for now.
No, not at all. And I totally understand that, because I think the other big question there is what happened to the BBC reporter? What happened to that young lady who was reporting and saying, it's gone down, and I think it was still standing there behind.
Yeah. Are you going to pull it? Well, here's another. There's so many things. I'll just give you one quick one that it's just so ridiculously obvious. Well, we can prove that the hijackers were involved and were on the planes and responsible for the attack, because we found the passport of one of them 2 blocks away on the road, proving that he was on that plane. Excuse me. The plane was incinerated. The floor was incinerated. The floors above and below were incinerated. And you're telling me that a little paper passport just made it through all that and happened to be laying on the street to be found? I mean, this is how ridiculous their lies are. And they tell them over and over and over until people get tired and want to go back to providing for their families and forget about it.
But that's the power of Xerox, I think, and their new printing paper,
right?
That is fireproof. But you said, you've said a really important thing there, which is people just want to go back and get on with their lives, and they're struggling to make a living and all the rest. And I suppose I go back to where I'm saying, why is it quite rightly you say about the lies, but why has it taken so long for us to reach this point? And are we, how many people are awake to what's going on? How many people look at this stuff within America? I still from the outside don't think it's enough. And please tell me what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I can tell you, being here and talking to a lot of people, listening to a lot of people, listening to a lot of interviews, Americans are extremely um, concerned about the state of our government, specifically the national security state. That's almost unanimous in the people that I talk to. Anybody that has looked into it at all is pretty much convinced that 9/11 was more than the official narrative said it was. So a lot of Americans are waking up. As a matter of fact, I am really pleasantly surprised with all of the articles coming out from Zero Hedge and several others about the CIA spying on people domestically and taking over Silicon Valley with their investment arm InQtel. And I talk about that in the book. A lot of that is coming out now, and it's really fulfilling because I've been a silent voice. And I say this humbly because I certainly paid for it. But people are coming out all over the place in the United States and writing about the CIA and its corrupt activity and spying on Americans. People in America are fed up. We just have to get to the people that are struggling to make ends meet with their family, don't want to hurt their career. If they speak up at the office, they could be fired. And once again, fear, 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 fear. And I understand that. There are people working in the CIA, a lot of good people working in the CIA. I know several of them. The director of intelligence, full of wonderful, intelligent people. But it's their whole livelihood. It's their family. It's their paycheck. It's their health insurance. And that's pretty much the case with most Americans, including in what I call the secret intelligence industrial complex, or SIC. I didn't plan it that way, but Lockheed Martin and all the others, they have tens of thousands of employees on these secret contracts, and they're providing for their families. It's their retirement. It's their health insurance. That's the kind of financial grip that the national security state has on this country. The only way that can be broken is with a movement, as has always been the case in America, a movement of millions of people that stand up, speak out, and say, we've had enough. We want reform, and get Congress to have a spine. And I hate to tell you, a lot of Congress is in the pocket of the CIA, and they're in the pocket of these secret intelligence industrial complex, huge contractors and lobbyists like Lockheed Martin. They're in the pocket of them. Congress has not done its job in holding the CIA accountable since the Church Committee. And one of the reasons is Church and Congressman Otis Pike, after they wrote their prospective reports, both their careers were destroyed, and they were driven out of office. They were slandered and mocked, and they lost their careers. And senators today, do they want to go through that and lose because that's what they're risking. The CIA will destroy them or try to destroy them. That's what they're risking. So they've gone into the coward category where they don't want to do anything. Even the intelligence oversight committees, I sent the evidence I had to them several years ago when I first was uncovering this stuff. Every single one of them on those committees, and not one responded. To his credit, only Marco Rubio did and said, thanks for the correspondence. I'll look into this. Well, Marco Rubio is one of the Gang of Eight. They've signed all the secrecy agreement papers, including SCI. And if they were to say anything remotely classified, the CIA could charge them with a criminal penalty. They're not going to say anything. That's how the system works. That's how they do it. So people have got to demand, listen, you stand up against the CIA and we start having some hearings, and we're going to vote you out of office, and you're going to lose your career and your fame and your power and your following. You better do this, or that's what we're going to do. It's the only way. And we demand a reform to the National Security Act of 1947, removing all covert activity authority from the Central Intelligence Agency and rephrasing the Security Act of 1947. The CIA's covert operational approval, if you will, would not have happened if it was not bundled in with the rest of the bill. Right. If it was a standalone bill, it never would have passed. But that's how they did it. They snuck it in there in the bundle of the National Security Act, and as congressmen and senators oftentimes do, they just carte blanche signed off on it. 70 didn't even read the Patriot Act and just signed it. That's how it goes on Capitol Hill. So the Avalanche I'm talking about, needs to demand Congress and Senate step up and do their job, representing us as the American people, and demand CIA reform.
And we can say the Obama Act. We can even go back to the creation of the Federal Reserve and our people.
Yeah.
You know, when votes are happened, when senators and everything have got to ride home on horses in winter and get back home.
Yeah.
Yes, we won't be there to do that. Or the Obamacare. You know, let's just pass this and read what's in it afterwards. But Kevin, I think you're asking people to stand up, and you're asking people on both sides to stand up, aren't you?
Absolutely. Yes. And I think people on both sides, those who care about the Constitution in our country, will do that. Democrats and Republicans, libertarians and others will do that. A lot of them already realize that the future of our country is at risk, and our Constitution itself is at risk, both Republicans and Democrats. And they will stand up when they're brought together under one umbrella, and that is the United States Constitution and our freedom. Freedom is what binds us all together as Americans, and it's that unity of freedom that's going to enable us to stand up against this CIA juggernaut and the national security state and demand that it be stopped and demand that it be reformed, or else we will vote you out of office and end your career.
I mean, reflecting on in the last sort of 5 or 10 minutes of this amazing conversation, and I'm so blessed by it, and I thank you for it, my dear friend, what are your reflections on the lawfare in regard to what's happened with President Trump, the whole, brag going, I'm going to get him, blah, blah, blah. What are your reflections on that? Because you said an important thing. You're in a post-constitution situation.
Yes. That trial never should have happened. It's constitutionally unsound. It is an unconstitutional trial. It is clearly a political attempt to attack Donald Trump. One of my favorite constitutional experts is Jonathan Turley, who actually represented our family after we were poisoned on that classified base for free. So he's one of my heroes. And Jonathan Turley, if you want to find out really the constitutional facts about the Trump trial in New York that just closed out, read Jonathan Turley's comments. It is unconstitutional. It's a trial that never even should have started, and it's clearly political.
Right. So where do you think we go from here with it? Are they then going to go, right, we're gonna put him in jail for a year or two? Will it be a suspended sentence? I mean, there is no doubt about it that they are trying to stop him to campaign.
Yeah, it's up to the judge when sentencing comes, and that's going to be a very maybe tragic event. We'll see what the judge does, whether he puts sanctions on him, whether he puts him under house arrest, whether he has him do community service, or goes all the way to a prison sentence. None of us know, except the judge himself when sentencing comes. So we won't know until that day.
And this is without precedent. This has never happened before.
It has not
at all.
No.
And I think I'm not being clever in saying this. I've done some research. I've written a little bit about this, and but with Lincoln at that time, in the Civil War, there was even a time when they were trying to get him off the ballot. They were trying to get Lincoln off the ballot. The voter fraud that was going on then was quite incredible. So there's a precedent to that. Then the precedent to what happened in 2020. You want, quite rightly, 100 million Americans to stand up. There'll also be many, many people around the world standing up with you, but we can't vote because that would be voter fraud, because we're not proper citizens of the United States of America. I just want to throw that out, even if a load of illegals are coming over.
But you are an important voice.
No, well, bless you, and thank you for that. So people standing up, how do you stop the potential fraud or anything happening in November?
Oh, this is going to be an ugly, messy country leading up to the election. How do you stop it? My gosh, because it's so multifaceted. It's like an octopus with several tentacles, and you have got the and I'm not, I'm not down on liberals at all. I have liberal friends. I love talking to a liberal, really do. But you've got the woke side, the George Soros side, that is pumping millions, really billions of dollars into making Donald Trump fail and the Republicans fail. A massive amount of money is against us. And I think programs like this, and coming out and speaking out loud before the election is the way to do it. I've become good friends with Bobby Kennedy Jr., and have had long discussions about this regarding the Constitution. He endorsed the book, which it's already a bestseller on Amazon. Twilight is, and it won't be published till January the 10th upcoming. All of those people have got to stand up like JFK is, and of course you can see what they're doing to him. They're just filleting him in the mainstream media, but he's a tough bird. I can tell you, he's an honest man. He's a wonderful guy. Guy's brilliant. He's the one that busted Dr. Fauci, and I would recommend people read his book, The Real Anthony Fauci. I wrote a segment for him in there because it was just so documented and so well researched. And then he has another one out called The Wuhan Cover-Up. I would encourage people to read that one too. They'll see how smart Bobby Kennedy is and how fully documented those books are, despite the fact that the mainstream media is doing what we would predict, calling him the Kennedy family scion, all using the same word. Calling him anti-science, which is the exact opposite of what he is. So there's going to be disgusting disinformation put out there by the mainstream media leading up to November. People need to, and I encourage people, because it's no longer taught in universities or even high schools, practice critical thinking when you hear the news reports. Critically think, what is the message they're really putting forth out to you? What are they trying to get you to think? Because that's what they do, is they try to get people to think their way, in the case of the Washington Post and the New York Times, and start critically thinking about what comes out, and then stand up against it publicly any way that they can, including writing to their elected official. One letter to a congressman, and they know this, is worth 1,000 other people who would like to write but don't. So do that. Be involved and stand up, and we've got to have this avalanche coming up before this coming November 2024.
And thank you. And my advice is, and as I don't apologize for this, because Genesis 12 verse 3 says it. If you pray, you bless my people, I will bless you. If you curse my people, I will curse you. And we need to be praying for the peace and the prosperity of Jerusalem. We need to be, we're not doing very well over here with that, because there is a blessing. And sadly, on your side of the pond, politically, the idiots in the White House are totally going against God in regard to that. So that is the only way out. And Kevin, I don't want to end this, but I've got to end this discussion, because otherwise I then get into editing hassle. But I just want to put up your book, your new book that's coming out, and we'll just show that again, The Twilight, the Shadow of the Government. And I look forward to receiving this. I also, if being a privileged position to hopefully maybe be able to meet you again and get I hope so, and get you to sign that.
It was an instant friendship when we met at that table, and we all had such a good laugh, and and I really have been like brothers ever since. So I'm not doing many interviews leading up to the book, but yours is at the top of the list. So you can have me back anytime, because you're a good friend, a good brother, and I appreciate what you're doing very much.
Kevin, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you so much for that. That is that is really so encouraging, and thank you. And I just want to thank everyone to listening to this incredible conversation. Please keep Kevin in your prayers, because Ephesians 6 says we're not fighting flesh and blood, but principalities and powers. And if the Lord is giving us, and we do believe that we are in the last days, if the Lord is giving us a window, then we want to grasp that. But because more importantly, we need a framework in which, in America and in the UK and in the rest of the world, to be able to preach the gospel freely. And that is all we ask. And that, and I'll say this with dear Kevin, that if you do not know Jesus as your Lord and Savior, then please go and sort this out now. I'm sorry I didn't say that at the beginning of the show, because I would rather you go and sort that out than in many ways than watch our discussion. because that is the actual priority. Kevin, I'm going to thank you. I'm going to play us out. I'm going to say goodbye to you on the other side. So don't leave me yet, but I'm just going to play us out. Thank you so much, my friend.